Good evening, everyone. I am a storyteller, and I am here to help you fall asleep with true horror stories. So before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. I would love to know where you are from and what time you are watching this, so leave me a comment when you are ready. Sit back and relax. I never thought that a simple trip could become the most terrifying memory of my life. That summer, my close friends and I decided to go on a picnic in a riverside forest in the suburbs. It was a wild area. Not many people visited, just the kind of place we wanted to enjoy the feeling of freedom. We brought tents, food, water, and flashlights because we knew we would be camping overnight. The afternoon passed peacefully. We set up tents, lit a campfire, and told each other silly ghost stories. No one noticed that the atmosphere started to become strange as dusk fell. The wind was light but cold. Even in the middle of the hot summer, the trees rustled strangely, as if someone was whispering among the leaves. As night fell, we gathered around the fire, grilling meat and laughing. But then, a strange noise rang out in the distance. At first, we thought it was just the sound of wildlife. But as it repeated itself, becoming more regular and clear, it sounded like someone was walking slowly through the dry leaves. I held my flashlight and shone it in the direction of the sound. There were only bare tree trunks, nothing but thick darkness. But the creepy feeling was something I couldn't ignore. I had the feeling that something or someone was watching us. Then a soft laugh rang out, faint as if carried by the wind. The group froze. None of us had made the sound. I looked around, the light from the fire reflecting on frightened faces. One friend said in a trembling voice, "Should we leave?" We decided to pack up quickly. But just as we started to fold up the tent, I heard footsteps, clearer this time, faster, as if someone was running towards us. I turned around, but there was nothing but darkness. Then suddenly, the flashlight in my hand flickered repeatedly before going out completely. A strong wind blew, stirring up the ashes of the campfire. A voice whispered right next to my ear, so soft that I couldn't hear it clearly, but enough to make me freeze with fear. I screamed, pulling the group out of the forest as fast as I could. We didn't dare to turn around, didn't dare to look to see what was following us. Only when we got in the car and closed the door tightly did we dare to breathe. No one said anything the whole way back, but everyone knew we didn't simply encounter a cold wind or random sounds in the forest. Something was there, right next to us. From then on, no one in my group dared to return to that forest. And every time I thought about it, I still felt like there was an invisible pair of eyes watching me in the darkness. Like creepy stories, real mysteries that make you shiver. Subscribe to the channel now, so you don't miss any stories. I grew up in a happy lakeside summer home in Northern California. It was home to some of my fondest memories: windy afternoons on the dock, carefree games in the attic with my cousins. But something changed everything, turning the place from paradise into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my life. After we grew up and stopped going there often, my parents decided to rent out the house for someone to look after. They chose an elderly veteran, a man who had been through war and was scarred not only in body, but also in soul. He had a strange appearance. He was thin, his face was deeply lined, and his eyes were vacant as if he were lost somewhere in the past. At first, everything seemed fine. But then the neighbors and the landscaper began to tell disturbing stories. They said he would stand silently near the lake for hours, watching the children play with a cold gaze. Some parents in the area even saw him standing in the dark, staring at them without saying a word. When I heard the story, I felt creepy, but my parents at the time still thought that maybe he was just a lonely person carrying the trauma of the war. Things only really changed when my mother decided that he could not stay any longer. Every time she visited home, she always had an uneasy feeling, as if something was wrong. Finally, she urged my father to end the lease. When the lease ended, my father asked him to leave. He didn't say much, just silently packed his things and left the house. It seemed like everything was over. A year later, we returned to the lake house to relax. It was a clear summer day, the golden sunlight reflecting on the still water. But as soon as I entered the door, I sensed something was wrong. The air in the house was strangely thick, as if the place had been invaded by something invisible. Our dog Rusty came bounding down the stairs, whining miserably. His paws were bloody, leaving dark red marks on the wooden floor. I panicked, quickly checking him, but found no serious injuries. What scared me more was the panic in his eyes. My father immediately searched the house. Everything seemed intact, but as he climbed the stairs and opened the attic door, a scream rang out. I ran, my heart pounding. In the darkness of the cramped attic, there sat the man, our former tenant. He was thinner, dirtier, his bloodshot eyes staring at us without emotion. A sense of dread washed over me as I realized that he had been here all this time, in the attic where I had played as a child. My father immediately called the police. When they arrived and dragged him out of the house, I noticed something in his hand, a small knife stained with something dark. I don't know if it was Rusty's blood, but it was enough to make me shiver. We should have pressed charges, but my father refused. He didn't want to get involved with the law, just wanted it all over as quickly as possible. So the man was taken away. No one knew where he was going. But I knew, somewhere out there, he was still watching. And every time I thought about it, the breeze by the lake felt a little colder, even on the brightest summer days. I never thought a relaxing evening would turn into a lifelong obsession. James and I grew up together, and his family's lake house was our favorite hangout. That evening, the wind blew gently through the trees and the lake was still, reflecting the moonlight. We sat on the porch, beer bottles rolling across the old wooden deck, chatting about innocuous things like work, life, and plans. Suddenly, James stopped talking. I followed his gaze out to the lake. A faint flicker of light, on and off, appeared in the water. "See that?" James asked. I nodded. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of a boat's lights or someone playing with a flashlight. But when I looked closer, I realized the light wasn't flickering randomly. It had a rhythm. 3 short flashes, 3 long flashes, 3 short flashes. "Someone's calling for help," James muttered. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms. In the dead of night, a distress signal appeared in the middle of the lake. What could it be? Who was making it? We looked at each other, neither of us saying anything for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but my conscience wouldn't let me. What if someone was in real danger? James said, standing up, "We have to go check it out." I hesitated, but then followed him down to the dock. We got into the small motorboat, started the engine, and headed out into the dark water, where the flickering light continued to appear. The wind on the lake was strangely cold, a far cry from the water. I could feel my heart beating faster with each wave that lapped against the boat. The closer I got, the more I felt something was wrong. The light didn't move. It was fixed in place, as if it were fixed. James cut the engine when we were only a few meters away. The silence was deafening. No insects, no wind, no sound other than my own breathing. "Hello?" James called out. No one answered. We shined our flashlights around the area. Something floated on the water, reflecting a faint light. I strained my eyes and realized it was a small boat, but it was empty. No one was inside. James reached out to pull the boat closer, but as soon as he touched it, he flinched. "What is this?" As I shined my flashlight down. In the darkness, I saw handprints all over the side of the boat, dark red, blotchy, as if someone had clutched it with bloody hands. I backed away, my heart pounding. We looked around, but the lake was nothing but deep darkness. If anyone was there, they were gone. Suddenly, there was a sound, a splashing sound, as if something had risen from the bottom of a nearby lake. I turned my flashlight, but saw nothing but small ripples. James lowered his voice. "We should go back." He didn't need to say it twice. I started the boat immediately, my hands shaking as I turned the throttle. As we turned to head back, I felt as if something was watching us from the darkness. A cold shiver ran down the back of my neck, making me not dare to turn around. It was only when the boat reached the shore that I realized my hands were soaked with sweat. We just stood there, looking at each other, neither of us saying a word. The light on the lake was gone. That night, I left the lake house with an empty feeling, as if there was a story that had not been fully told. And every time I think back to that light, I always wonder who sent the SOS signal and what happened to them. Because one thing I know for sure is that no one could just disappear into the middle of the lake like that. These stories are not simply scary events that happen in the dark, but they reflect the deepest fears of every human being. Fear of trespassing, of unexplained mysteries, and of things lurking in the dark that we will never fully understand.